This is the Digital Shelf Insider podcast of Metrics Card. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Shreshta, and today we are back with another episode of Digital Shelf Insider. Today we have a very special guest. It's Matthew Kelly. He's the head of e-commerce at Precious, and he's worked with some of the top e-commerce brands such as Gailey's, um, Johnny Walker, Guinness, and more. So, Matthew, let's hear it out from you about what you do and your work at Precious. And I think you have your hands on different really cool stuff.
Yes. Thank you for having me, and look forward to chatting for the next half hour or so. Yeah, let me give a brief kind of intro in terms of myself. I've worked in digital e-commerce and kind of that strategic commercial angle for the last kind of, I say 20 years, but probably more in detail, probably the last kind of 10 to 15 years. It's a fast-paced, evolving industry. What is great, it keeps you on your toes. No day is the same day. New technology is evolving. I mean, AI is just unbelievable what's happening in that space. And it's progressing everything that we're doing, which is super exciting. As you alluded to, I've worked, kind of work at Precious, where I kind of lead commerce. So a combination of kind of e-commerce, digital, how the whole omni-channel digital shelf all kind of interacts and play a huge role in kind of generating that value for the consumer, whether it's kind of discovery online, then purchasing offline, or using the whole kind of food line in an online capacity. And throughout the years, I kind of worked in various different industries, from electronics to beauty to more recently in the alcohol sector, where I work a lot with the likes of Captain Morgan, Johnny Walker, Guinness, Bailey's, just to name a few. Very different approaches and different perspectives in each of those brands. And historically, there are what's amazing is just how the industry has just evolved, and the push in the digital remit, which is just is super exciting. I mean, some of the work that we're doing on Captain Morgan at the moment is groundbreaking. I don't say that lightly. And some of the digital transformation, the activations that we're doing, looking at nostalgia, marketing back from the 90s, how that plays a huge part in terms of how you're creating value and creating that demand supply for the consumer is great, and it's great to be a part of.
Awesome. I think since you spoke about the evolution part, it's been very fast in 2024, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Christ, AI is what's just making everyone on their toes. I mean, the tools that are coming out, whether it's, the reporting side, the content creation side, um, efficiency in operations, from a business point of view is phenomenal. I'm seeing so many tools at the moment about how you can optimize your creative, or even create your creative, or even create second versions of Matthew Kelly. I mean, it's quite phenomenal what it can do. Yeah, I haven't tried that one yet, but maybe one day.
Yeah. So early on in your career, you worked with premium beauty brands. So, when it comes to the digital shelf strategy and execution with premium beauty brands versus drugstore brands, what are the differences that you see?
Or when comparing like a premium beauty to kind of more of a mainstream kind of FMCG beauty brand.
Right.
Good question. I think it all comes. I mean, the big trend has always been about value, and different brands perceive value to be different perspectives. One might be it's about promotions, other people it's about good content creation. If we're looking at kind of premium beauty, it's more about having the level of content that kind of justifies that price point. Premium beauty, certainly in the UK, the price point is £30 and above. In the US, that might translate to be more like $40 and above. And it's about how you articulate that offering in a digital arena. And that might be, through great photography where it has, a before and after. That product description, that title tag, and the features and bullets that more about justifying, the emotional connection, that going after the consumer pain points. People, if we kind of look at some of the brands that I worked on, when we did a product around kind of bad skin, around acne, And whilst you couldn't in the UK through legislation write acne, there are ways around it in terms of blemishes and, you know, I was thinking some of the phrases that we use, but
Right.
it was around that storytelling piece that was fundamentally important to how we justified that piece of real estate and that product to justify that price tag, and overlaying that with kind of customer testimonials. What you find in beauty is it's not necessarily an overnight success. It might take 6 weeks of trying a product before you get those results, and it's about how you document that on the landing page or on a product detail page. And that has to really come across. So what you find a lot in premium beauty is that those landing pages or product pages are actually they're longer form content as opposed to short form content. And that plays a huge role in kind of that storytelling aspect as you scroll down. But it's about creating that initial hook that gets that consumer into it. That the hook is justified through the seam of the page as that consumer scrolls through. On the flip side, where you've got kind of those products which are probably £10 and less, probably even £5 and less, it's more about, yes, you're gonna have the same sort of content, but it's more about a convenience and it's more about price. Can I get that tomorrow? Is there a bulk purchase behind it? Is there clear promotional messaging? It's about comparisons as well. Um, and the flip side is, if something doesn't work in a justified period of time to what you perceive that to be, you throw it away and you forget about it. It's that kind of no-brainer purchase. And fundamentally, quite often what happens is that consumers will start there and they may not get the desired results in that period of time because the content hasn't necessarily given that confidence that it's going to work in that period of time. They then starts to do more research and they're kind of upsold to the more premium content as kind of their stepping stone because they're on their skincare or beauty journey, so to speak. So I think there are fundamental differences between the two, but both they're just done because a consumer and the persona of that audience is slightly different.
Right. It so happens that when it comes to drugstore brands, people may switch brands more quickly than premium brands, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Mm,
you'll find that there's a lack of loyalty. I mean,
mm,
traditionally, I think there's a loyalty is difficult to do. I think in beauty there probably is a bit more loyalty, just because you know you get confidence in one brand and you're more likely to stick with that brand. But
mm.
when it's a lower threshold product, I would say loyalty is pretty thin on the ground. But when you're kind of spending £30 and above, then there's more justification to stay with that brand because you've had a good experience. And then you might be upsold to a cleanser, or whether it's a toner, or whether it's some kind of acid, lactic acid, or an exfoliator. So you are typically a higher price point. You're bound to stay within that. If you've had a good experience, that is, you're bound to stay within that brand. I certainly do with my skincare regime. I'm sure you do too. You kind of
Right.
you stick to what you know,
Yeah.
and the difficulty is as you kind of get older, I mean, I'm getting into really scientific detail here because I've worked in beauty.
Yeah.
Um, your skin elasticity changes as you get
Change.
older, as it would do. So then actually you need to change your skincare regime, but it's about staying, most people will stay in the domain of the brand that they purchased, but it's about evolving that. And that's sometimes the challenge in terms of how you articulate that in a digital environment to get the consumers to cross sell or upsell depending on what they're currently using.
Absolutely. So when it comes to digital shelf performance data, uh, when brands are looking at them, there's a a a gap that could be there in terms of data inaccuracies or not having the right resources looking at them, or the frequency at which the tech provider is like giving them this data is not aligning with their long-term goals. So what do you think is apt for a brand to do in such a situation? Should they like stick on with the tech provider, or should they again jump and move and experiment with another person?
Well, this is a difficult one to answer because I don't
Mhm.
think there's not a one size fits all approach. I mean, if you were to look from a kind of a small startup challenger brand, they they won't have legacy systems in place. They'll probably be using new platforms.
Mhm.
They might have a website on Shopify. They could easily integrate that into a multitude of different data exchanges to extract the data that they need, or they might even have that data, the level of data that they need on on that platform to actually extract what they need, whether it's kind of a share of search, content compliance, ratings, reviews, and performance, etc. Whatever the KPIs that they've set. Um, Larger brands, they're the big CPG brands, whether it's Procter and Gamble, Unilever, even like retailers such as Tesco's, Walmart's, etc. They'll have legacy systems in place that have been there for 10, 20, maybe even 30 years. And actually changing those systems becomes not just changing one thing, but you change one thing, it's bound to affect something else down the chain. So I always say that, for platforms like this, and I've been involved in quite a few reporting suites and seeing how the limitations on some and some that are fantastic. It's about a hybrid approach, but I mean, fundamentally, first of all, it's about going back to the basics. It's about what are the foundations of that data that we actually need. Is it kind of the share of search that I mentioned, content compliance, rating reviews? Is it around sales? Is it around digital shelf health? There'll be a multitude of different KPIs that different brands will report on. And in some of the instances, they're going to have that data, or if they don't, it's probably in the data set that they have, but it's just they can't extract it in a way that to actually physically understand it. So I don't think it's about kind of replacing what you have. It's about layering on top what's actually required. And with the likes of AI, which is firmly in everyone's grasp these days, there will be a technology out there that can be overlaid as a kind of a hybrid solution to support what you already have, and then overlaying that to extract additional data that one might need to, to report on that performance, whether it's kind of digital shelf, which is, a huge a huge area for lots of brands at the moment. It's about creating value online. Then those tools become fundamental to help you kind of articulate and contextualize your data and kind of go to the next level.
Definitely. I remember seeing one of your posts on LinkedIn where you mentioned that uh, a well-executed digital shelf strategy or optimizing the digital shelf could lead to increased foot traffic in physical stores. So this is for brands who probably haven't completely understood the message. What exactly? How does that happen?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, I think that brands in 2025 that don't start improving some of their digital shelf will fall behind. And I think the post you're referring to is the one I talked about in terms of Target, how they kind of really ramps up what they're doing online. Target's having a few issues of itself, but more from a kind of a physical store perspective, not necessarily an online point of view. Um, but it's about making sure that you have content that's discoverable in an online capacity, first of all. I mean, just think about how you shop and how I shop. I do a lot of my research online. I'm sure you do too. Some products you don't need to go into a store to purchase. Other products you would. Take the take DIY products. Say you're painting your bedroom. You know, you can see physical paint. Oh, you can see physical. You can see the paint and the color palettes online.
Yeah.
But sometimes it never beats going into a store and actually physically seeing that paint and doing it and having a tester. And that's where the breakdown sometimes happens. And it's about making sure that your content online is that kind of trust builder. Whether you could maybe order a sample to collect in store, whether it's about that kind of color texture, whether it has those reviews to kind of validate that that is the right product that you want, and having those mechanics in an online capacity that say what the inventory level is in your local store, so you can go down there and pick it up. What are those kind of in the US it's curbside collection, in UK it's click and collect. It's all about those kind of hooks, and it could even be also location in terms of your nearest branch or nearest location that you can go and collect it from. Just because it's a physical store, they might have other outlets where you can actually go and purchase that product as well or pick it up. So it's about really connecting those dots. And I think omnichannel is a massive bit, or connected commerce is, I think, is kind of the phrase which is being coined over the last few months. It's about really connecting those dots. And I think some of the bigger brands like Walmart, Target, are doing a fantastic job, and other brands are not quite there yet. They're kind of playing around with QR codes, and I think QR codes, certainly had their moment in COVID. I think QR codes off a separate subject. QR codes are great for going into a bars, but they haven't quite got it yet. Certainly in the UK, I think the whole kind of join the dots. I think we're on the right tracks, but I think there's some overlaid technology that will help there, and I think they haven't necessarily connected what's happening in the retail media space with the online world yet to really kind of connect those dots. And I think brands are. I think 2025 would be a huge moment for how brands do a better job in connecting that. But certainly, Target, the example, have done a fantastic job. I think Walmart, I think, tends to be that brands in the US are a bit more advanced than brands in the UK, but I think brands in the UK are certainly catching up.
Absolutely. So if we consider a CPG brand that is selling on Amazon, Walmart, and Target, and what would be the difference in the brand retailer relationship the brand might have to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, if you're taking those three retailers, you've got one which is pure play online brand in Amazon. You've got Target and Walmart, which are more traditional retail partnerships. Um, I mean, if we take Amazon first of all, it's more about making sure your fundamentals from an online point of view are in place, whether it's kind of brand stores, whether it's your kind of your product detail page in terms of the content that you have on there, the bullet points, the pain points, descriptions, enhanced content, whether it's A plus or premium enhanced, depending on what you have as a brand. And then obviously it's about the advertising. There's a multitude of different touch points you can do on Amazon, which is fantastic. It can also be quite expensive. But part of the big play on Amazon is obviously conquesting to make sure you're beating your competitors to kind of take market share, category growth, that you're higher up the rankings that can obviously then fundamentally help you from a kind of a sales point of view. On the flip side, you have Walmart and Target, which although they're different retailers, they obviously deploy more of a traditional retailer partnership. And for there it's more about joint business planning, joint category planning, and aligning your metrics to what they have, making sure it's fundamentally in place. It's more of a relationship building. Not to say that Amazon isn't about relationships, it absolutely is, but it's a different process that one will go through. And I think the emphasis is on kind of that online to offline in more of a capacity here. I think Walmart and their kind of connected advertising space, they're doing an amazing job in kind of connecting that in-store and online inventory alignment particularly well. And I think that's where there becomes more of a joint business planning element involved there. There's also kind of that price consistency across channels. You don't necessarily need to do that with Amazon, but you do in a kind of a Walmart and a Target. But it's also, the big push in terms of retail media. It's about, making sure that what you have in online is replicated. Sorry, what you have in the online is replicated in an in-store environment as well. So there's that customer journey is seamless, whether you're kind of doing a weekly top-up shop or whether you're doing your weekly shop online. But I think fundamentally, I think that if you take kind of that traditional, it's almost like what I call like a hub and spoke model that you need, certainly from a kind of a traditional partnership with a Walmart or Target. It's about having that central team that kind of makes sure that that pricing strategy is right, the brand guidelines are done. You're centralizing your e-commerce, so everything looks seamless, whether you're offline or online. But then you have your kind of the spoke team, which is more about building that core relationship, the daily kind of liaison with the account manager's daily liaison with the retailer or the customer to make sure that everything is aligned, that that you're not kind of confusing the consumer, that they don't pick up your products whether you're in store or online.
So true. So very true. So we just discussed about brand retailer relationship. The other thing that often brands make as a mistake is that they think they have the product content on their listing for Amazon figured, and then they think, okay, they can just copy paste that same thing on Walmart and Target, just replicate as it is. So this definitely does that. It doesn't get them results. How do you think shopper missions get affected when this is the case?
Yeah, I mean, this comes up so often. It's quite uncanny, to be honest. And even the big brands do it. So it's not just a case of this is a smaller. I'd say actually the smaller brands. Actually, no, I'll take that back. Actually, shopper missions are fundamentally key, and this comes down to I'm very passionate about audience personas. I think that audience personas, if you do a great job in understanding who the persona is of your audience, I don't mean age, I mean attitude. So, you can have a healthy 70-year-old who wants to eat healthy nutritional food versus a 20-year-old who wants to eat healthy nutritional food. It's not an age, it's an attitude. And I think, if brands fully understand their audience in terms of the motivations, what makes them tick, is it content, is it price, what's the primary driver, how they interact with different mediums. One might like to use QR codes, one might be traditional TV, one might be online media. And once you start to understand that, then you start to understand actually how these consumers shop. Um, so, traditionally in our household, we do one weekly shop online that comes on a Friday or Saturday, sets us up for the week. There's always a tendency that you'll do a convenience top-up shop during the week because often something didn't come or you've forgotten to get something. It's just the nature of how it is. And then there will always be, you're in town, during the week as well, and there's a craving for something. So then you're going into that shop to pick up something. And all of those are different shop emissions. Whether it's I need food for tonight because I only did 4 meals on my weekly shop, to I want a bottle of X, or I need, a snack during the day. And all of those are different shop emissions. And I think brands that are selling products, sometimes as an easy way out, they have their core product detail page content, digital shelf content, which is great. It's optimized, great imagery. Overlay that with some copy on imagery. It looks fantastic. But what they fail to forget is that different platforms and different customers that they work with, there'll always be a supply and demand in the sense that different platforms cater to different shop emissions depending on how they interact. So the local convenience store. So if we take the example of the UK, we have Tesco Express and you have Tesco's. I'm not sure it's local, but mini convenience stores you can go and collect. And depending on where you are, there's going to be a slightly different shop emission for a consumer. And it's about making sure that content speaks to that consumer at that particular time. The convenience store is someone that might want something for tonight. So the messaging in store or online needs to reflect that. And the content, a weekly shop needs to reflect that. And at online capacity, that might be somewhat of a challenge, but it's about understanding that, you're going to be going for a particular customer, understanding what the objective and KPIs that you're going to set will determine the content that you have. So it's all well and good having master copy, but it's making sure that you are adapting that for particular customers that you're working with. It's not about doing wholesale changes. It's about nuanced changes that reflects that. And that will go a long way, to getting a consumer to engage and buy, but also it actually helps you from an SEO point of view as well. So it's a way of kind of, I say dominating search. It's probably the wrong phrase, but it's about getting ahead of the game for and future proofing your brand or product.
Definitely. I guess people search very differently on Amazon, Walmart. Like if you just take the case of coffee, they might search very differently on Amazon and it would be different on Walmart as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Walmart, as you say, it's more about I need to just get some coffee. I know if I'm doing my weekly shop, I don't shop in Walmart, but Walmart would be right. It might be more price dependent, whereas Amazon is more about discovery, engaging, there's storytelling behind it, where the coffee beans have come from, as an example, how to make the perfect coffee, or using coffee in a cocktail, to make an espresso martini, for an example. It's about making sure that content fits the narrative, and I think Amazon allows you to have that richer storytelling. It's not to say that Walmart doesn't, but Walmart probably doesn't need the in-depth level of content that an Amazon would do, because Amazon is more of a pure play, whereas obviously Walmart is more traditional. And as we just talked about, different shop emissions have different shopper objectives.
Makes so much of sense. So at Metriscard, we are a digital shelf tech provider, and we take care of rating and review, share search, content compliance, all of that. And we covered some of those. Now, one other key aspect is maintaining price consistency across online platforms, and MAP plays a key role in that. How critical do you think brands need to monitor MAP, and is there awareness gap in the industry?
That's a good question. I mean, if we take, I mean, price is fundamentally the most important.
Yeah.
Taking the mark, the four Ps, you could argue that, product is the most important. Obviously, product is super important, but close behind that, or even top of that, is price. People, especially in nowadays, value means different things to different consumers. And it probably depends on what you're purchasing. Value on a grocery shop is more about price. Whereas you're buying, if you're going to, a music event, it might be more about the actual value of it in terms of what you're getting out of it. A 3 hour event might be worth X amount to a consumer. But if you're kind of scaling it back to the kind of the food and drink, or beauty or anything like that, price for me is fundamental, because brands should be monitoring what their price is across different retailers and platforms, because what you don't want to get is, Amazon are a prime example. Is that if Amazon want to win the consumer in the buy box, they will massively reduce the price, which then, as a ricochet, you'll get other brands having to follow suit, because they have a high inventory of stock that they need to sell. So brands should be closely monitoring it. It's not that they can go and affect it by saying you need to charge this, because obviously you can't do that, but they can then look at their sales strategy to say, right, okay, these are the right type of retailers we should be working with, and these are retailers that we're not. Your point in terms of an awareness gap, I think there are some brands that fundamentally will be checking this, and other brands that, it's more of a periodic thing. If we to break it down a kind of a 100% rule, that, I would say that the top tier brands, the big, the Unilevers, the Procter and Gambles, the Diageos of this world, there's probably about 20% of those brands globally that are, have robust systems in place. They're kind of actively monitoring that. And a lot of that is because they have the teams in place. The smaller brands, there might only be half a dozen people working there, and they just don't have the manpower to do it, the resource. But those larger brands will have that in place. They have the strong relationships with those brands that they can, understand what's happening. What are those promotional deals that they're doing, because that's part of the inventory that they purchased. And those relationships are key. You then have that middle tier. I say probably 50% of the brands out there, they are conducting more periodic, insights in terms of that they're manually checking what's happening in terms of their price. But it's not consistent. Just because, again, it's probably more about the resources, and they're struggling with, the mass retailers that they're working with, whether it's a convenience store, whether it's a big grocery, or whether it's someone in the on trade. They just don't necessarily have the resources. And then you have the bottom tier, which is probably about 30%, 50, 20, 30, about 30%, and they only monitor kind of the big retailers because they're their key accounts. So the Walmarts, the Tesco's, the Sainsbury's, the Carrefours, whoever it might be that they're working with, because that's their key customers that they're working with. But is there a knowledge gap? Of course, there's a knowledge gap. I think price is fundamentally important, because it will dilute your margin. And when you might look at your balance sheet or your forecasting, and what you're projecting, and where you are, and you might see that you sold more units, but the price, the value is down, because you haven't understood where that price is, because fundamentally you're being squeezed at wholesale or distribution level. So I think, you talked about kind of Metriscard and what it can do. It feels a bit of a no-brainer, that kind of a overlaying it's kind of a hybrid approach, layering over in terms of almost being that account manager, or part of the team to add that foundational layer to support those brands. It feels like it's a bit of a no-brainer. But on the flip side, I think a lot of brands don't fully understand it at the same time. So there's a bit of a learning curve to go through. It would be what I'd see, because it would help protect, brand value, maintain that healthy relationship that you have, that you're not just kind of constantly discounting. And it just ensures a fair competition for the retailers that, that brand is working with.
Right. I think the challenge also lies in the fact that they have a lot of things to sort, and they have. I'm talking about the smaller brands. They
Yeah,
have very small teams, and they're just juggling with too much of work. So a lot doesn't happen that way.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, it's smaller brands, they're probably doing some product innovation. They're probably looking to, get some investment as well. So a lot of the attention goes into the investment. It's about, finding the right staff team to come on board, and all of that takes away the headspace. Because often, I see lots of stuff on LinkedIn, especially over the last 6 months, how challenger brands have secured, you know, uh, has secured listings in major retailers. And you think that's fantastic, but that's the easy bit. I mean, it's not easy, but in a sense, that's the easy bit. The next bit is actually how you manage to sell the product in the store that you don't get delisted in, say, 90 days, and juggling that as well as all the other things is just it becomes a massive barrier. You solve the supply, but now you need to create the demand that people go in and purchase your product. Um, and having a metrics cart to help from a pricing point of view and other tools there as well, so, from an analytical point of view, is only going to enhance and make and take away some of the headaches that are undoubtedly going to come onto the horizon over the coming weeks as you start to kind of build your momentum.
Right. Thank you so much, Matthew, for your time. And it was such an awesome conversation with you. If our audience want to find you, where can they find you?
Yes, well, you can go onto LinkedIn, type in Matthew Kelly. I should come up. There's similar to what I look like now. It's not an old photo; it's a fairly recent one. As I say, I help e-commerce and shopper marketing teams kind of explode their kind of digital content, but I also have a kind of a strategic and commercial angle to what I do. So yeah, please connect, follow, DM. Love to jump on a call and have a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Matthew.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, then. We've come to the end of the episode. If you loved what you just listened to, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll be back next Monday with a really awesome guest. Stay tuned until then.